Fair.
Tuck and Los until 10 on the Morning Extra on Extra 106.3. We've been talking about this guest for the last couple of days, coming in at 9:25, and he is here, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. What about you guys?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right, there we go.
Yeah,
Mic's
you
on.
doing all right?
Yeah, mic's on.
Okay, there we go. All good.
What's the campaign been like so far for you?
Every day's a new day. Every
Okay.
day's busy.
Okay, all right. Well, we are glad that you're here because we've talked about this a lot. That you probably have the most name recognition of anybody that's running for governor.
You have like such a unique scenario compared to everyone else around the country.
Well, is that a fact?
That's how we described it. And so, what our audience, you're in such a unique scenario because, you know, there's people around the country that might know some of Georgia politics, but based on what's happened in recent years, you know, you are somebody who's running for governor, but also there's people around the country that know from the 2020 election. And so it's almost like you're having to say, well, let me tell you what my vision is, but I also have to explain some of the things that happened in the past around here.
Well, not talking so much about the past, nothing to explain, because right now I'm the only person running for governor that's actually beaten Stacey Abrams and her allies over a dozen times in court because she's never wanted us to check citizenship. And we're trying to make sure that only American citizens vote, only American citizens are on the voter list. And we've won every time we've met her or her allies in court. In fact, they sued us about a month ago. They just continue on. But at the end of the day, our elections are free, fair, and fast. And that's according to Fox News, election night 2024. He said Georgia and Florida run the best elections in the entire country. And he's half right. Georgia runs the best elections in the entire country.
Our guest, Brad Raffensperger, on the Morning Extra and Extra 106.3, running for governor here in the state of Georgia. Why do people have so many questions about 2020 still? Because our callers, I mean, we've had callers all morning that have serious concerns about that. Are our elections secure? Are our elections free and fair? Are they the best? Why do people have so many questions still?
Well, I think many people get confused by terms because they're not out there actually as a poll worker. Number one, we have a paper ballot. You can audit any election. And so that's really important that they know that we can do this. We're checking citizenship. That's really important. In fact, the feds are trying to work on their SAVE Act. Well, we already do that stuff here in Georgia. We make sure that we verify citizenship, make sure we have a clean voter list, making sure that we have photo ID when you show up to vote. And it's about 75% of people all show up to vote, and we have quick results, and we have lines less than an hour. We think that's all tremendous. So at the end of the day, I think, you know, when I'm talking to folks out in Georgia, what they're really asking, who's going to take care of what's really, you know, where we're at right now. And that's really affordability. And it's not that buzzword that Democrats are using or everyone's talking about. It's really the pain points of, well, housing is too high, whether it's buying a house or renting a home. Food's too much. Healthcare's too high. You know, and now it's gas is too high. And so you're seeing people that are having to get a second job. You're seeing seniors right now. They're saying, Brad, do you know, I don't know if I can stay in my home. There's actually a lady.
Property taxes?
Property taxes, yeah. Absolutely. There's a lady in DeKalb County a week ago. She came up beside me. She's still in the workforce. She said, about 7 years ago, we bought our home in DeKalb County, paid $2,000 a year. It's now $11,000. And she just kind of turned and walked away. I wanted to ask her one question. Did your income go up $9,000 in the last 7 years? And what do you think her answer would have been?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And that's what you're seeing right now is people are getting pushed, and that's why I'm running to make sure that we cap property taxes for everyone. And for our seniors, we eliminate all non-essential property taxes for them and also quit taxing them on their retirement benefits. We're actually taxing our seniors on their retirement benefits, IRAs, pensions, 401ks, Social Security. We're one of 14 states that do it, and I think it's enough is enough. They've worked hard. They've earned it. It's their money. They should be able to keep it.
Let's talk about what's been so important in the news, the SAVE Act, and you have 80 to 85% of Americans across the board that all believe that voter ID laws should be available. Now, considering that what has gone through on your watch, we've now seen record turnout in the state of Georgia. And it's not just Republicans, that's Democrats, everyone being able to vote. What has been your opinion when you start to see some of the people from the Democrat side that say somehow having ID is somehow restrictive to voting?
We get sued on that. We have been sued on that, and we actually won it. had to go to appeal, but when we did win, it allowed us to continue to use photo ID and also driver's license. So our driver's license has the little star on it if you're an American citizen, and that verifies citizenship. So DDS does a robust check, but then we go ahead and do our own check, and then the counties do a check to make sure people are American citizens and making sure that no one's getting onto the system. What you look at with the SAVE Act is really just doing what we do in Georgia already. And what you look at is over 95% of all people showing up to vote are using their driver's license. But we do accept other forms of identification. I've told the General Assembly now for 2 sessions, and they still haven't done it, is we need to pass real ID, and the only thing we would take is a real ID. And if you don't have the money, don't need a driver's license, we'll give you one for free, because that's what we did about 15 years ago when we passed photo ID to get it through the scrutiny of the courts so we didn't get sued by the left. But if we do that, then we'll have real ID for everything, because you need real ID to get on an airplane. You need real ID to get into federal office building. I think you should have to have real ID to vote. We do that, and we're just another way of shoring it up. And what it does is it builds trust, and trust is confidence, and that's what you want. It works together hand in hand.
Our guest is Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State of the state of Georgia and running for governor in the state. Since we're talking about voting, what are the specific and the steps that we've taken since 2020 to make sure that chain of custody for ballots cannot be broken or obscured or messed up at the local level? What are we doing there to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Well, actually, the 2 biggest things I think we did with, the Election Integrity Act of 2021 is, first of all, we've now using photo ID for your absentee ballots. Because and most people are using the driver's license number. Before it was signature match, now it's signature match plus putting down your driver's license number, a unique identifier. That really shores up people's confidence in that. And only about 5 or 6% are voting absentee, but we still want to make sure it's secure. I think that's really important. And then number 2, prior to the Election Integrity Act, the Secretary of State, no one had any authority to actually fire a inept, incompetent county election director. Now we have a process that you can do a review, and Fulton County has been under 2 reviews, since 2021. And so that's really powerful that we went back and did a look of what happened in 2020, and that just kind of led to some other questions. And then after the election of 2022, they still had some mistakes and they still had some issues, so they're put under review again. So that's a good way that there's accountability. And it should be all 159 counties can be accountable, just because you can end up a county finally gets its act together, but what about another county? They start, sliding away. So you always want to have accountability. Finally, we have some accountability, and that's really handled through the state election board. But at the end of the day, there is accountability finally, and I think that's really shored up a lot of confidence in folks.
I think given the history, this is an important question because we've heard from even somebody like Governor DeSantis, because of him going through the primary process against Donald Trump. It was, how do you plan on working with the administration moving forward? If you find yourself in that position of being Georgia governor, how do you see working with the Trump administration given the history that we've had in the last several years?
Oh, I think we'll work with them great, because my focus is on the people of Georgia. I work for the people of Georgia. So what do we need to do to get along with Washington? Well, first of all, we agree with President Trump on 2 really important things. Number 1 is he shut the border down. He didn't need any new laws. He just shut it down, and look at that, 90 days, probably even 60, it was shut down. And so now that meant all of a sudden a lot of the illegal people coming across, that was stopped. But what about the drugs, human trafficking? So those are things that, we should have never allowed to get out of hand under the Biden administration. And then number 2, he wants to reshore manufacturing back to America. If you ask people on both sides of the aisle, but you ask people, they say, boy, we have hollowed out our blue collar middle class.
And we have.
And all those jobs went to China. We want them back. And what's going to come back, though, is the good-paying jobs, the advanced manufacturing. Boy, does Georgia have a great story to tell. So we'll partner with anyone that wants to partner with us. And President Trump wants to do that. And as governor, I'm going to be making sure that's what we do, is focus on bringing back jobs, good jobs. Because my number 1 goal as your governor is going to make sure that we create great-paying jobs. You want to change a person's life from Monday to Friday, get them a good-paying job. That's my focus. And that's what really is how you take a dent, and that's how you beat that affordability issue. You get more money in your pocket, then you go ahead and cap property taxes for everyone, and then for our seniors, you eliminate all non-essential taxes, and you also quit taxing them on the retirement benefits. You do those 4 things, and people are going to have a good life. That also means we got to get trades education back into our high schools. We're short 5 million electricians right now in America. Well, we're short electricians here in Georgia.
I will tell you, we actually have our representative, Dr. Rich McCormick, who he has his son graduate 4-year degree, and he's planning on electrical school because that is an area where if you want to talk about AI, proofing your future, that's one way to go ahead and do it. I think a lot of these jobs that have been traditionally looked at as blue collar, I'm using my hands, that has been largely made fun of by the left, that is a bright future in this country if we can get them back and start creating more of those people.
And I really want to give a shout to, I come out of the construction industry. I'm a structural engineer, licensed contractor. But the construction trades industry, they're actually going into these high schools and having competitions and training.
Skills USA is an organization doing that.
And they're doing that. And then they have this competition between high schools.
That's right.
And so then they'll show on the board, they had one in Columbus, how much you would make as an electrician. They showed $32.50. Then for plumbers, it was $35. Surprised me. But I thought that was still tremendous. And then they had welders, and then they had cement masons, all these different trades. And then you think about HVAC technicians, people, sheet metal workers. There's so many things. In fact, the AJC had an article about 3 months ago. This young fellow, 21 years old, making over $100,000 a year, working on one of these, mid-rise, high-rise type projects. He's already bought a house. He's getting married. So you think he is on his way, and he really enjoys life because he has no student loan debt, making over $100,000. And that's the American dream. And we need to work hard at reshoring manufacturing back to America, getting people into trades because there's a shortage of that. We have UCB coming out there halfway between Athens and Atlanta, and they're going to be, advanced biomedical, where they're going to need people in the skilled industry. So they'll need some people with, advanced, degrees, obviously coming out of college. They'll also need people, technical schools, but they're also going to need people that are just skilled tradespeople for those manufacturing projects. And that's going to be thousands of jobs right there.
Our guest, go ahead, finish.
No, what I will say is Governor Kemp has done a tremendous job. And you have to think, for 4 years, he was fighting the Biden administration because they had different attitudes and different worldviews. Now he's finally had, he's finishing up for 2 years with President Trump, and I'm sure that he feels, boy, I finally have someone that thinks like us, thinks like a business person, wants to create jobs. And he's done tremendous, and now he's going to go out on a really high mark.
Our guest is running for governor here in the state of Georgia. Brad Raffensperger is currently the Secretary of State. I have a cousin who's a lineman, very similar to the example that you just gave. Just got married. He can't buy a house because he's not home long enough. He's on the road working all the time. So I understand that, and the skilled trades is so stinking important. The phone call heard around the world. That is something that we get calls about with some sort of regularity. Do you think Donald Trump should have been prosecuted here in the state of Georgia because of what happened in 2020?
No. I think that obviously it was lawfare. It just kept on going on and going on. And, I know that some people, politically there was things, but if you talk to most lawyers, they just said, it just didn't have the laurels. I'm an engineer, but the lawyer just said no. It's just really pushing buttons, and it backfired on the Democrats. First of all,
of course,
Joe Biden, he didn't do a good job. Open borders and high inflation, and look, that's one of the reasons we have this affordability crisis. And then they, put up Kamala Harris. She would have been an absolute disaster. And that's
as
why
as a president.
Well, she was an absolute disaster as a vice president.
Well, who would have known that the mugshot, because, and we go back through some of the history of this stuff, at the time you had Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump basically polling at the same number. As soon as the lawfare kicked in, it kicked his career back into overdrive, and you started to see so much of the corruption on the left. I know you obviously had to go to court to deal with a lot of this stuff, but I think for the everyday American, they went, what kind of society am I living in where a former president is being prosecuted in this way?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, also when you look at the Democrats going back to Kamala Harris, she was just weak on crime. And actually right now, the Democrats' number one person that they have that they're holding up is Keisha Lance Bottom. I don't think anyone should hopefully they haven't forgotten, when she was mayor, the city of Atlanta was on fire.
Do a little homework,
Yep,
They need. Well, they don't have to do, and a little bit of homework. It won't take you a lot.
No.
Because first of all, they shut down the interstate. They burned out Wendy's, and then a fellow had his bulldozer, firebombed, and so it was $1 million worth of damage there, and so it delayed it. And they talked about they wanted public safety, but then she was in effect, Keisha Lance Bottoms was leading the defund the police movement, and so that's the person I'll be facing in the fall, and I'm going to beat her because she's not good for public safety. She's not good for jobs. Jobs were fleeing Atlanta, people were fleeing Atlanta, and the schools were going downhill. We need good schools. If we're going to attract industry, we need to have someone that has safe communities. And one of my goals is making sure that we have, police training bonuses, retention bonuses, so we keep our law enforcement. Because there's been lasting negative consequences of her defund the police movement. We need to make sure that people understand it's respected. We need to get wages up. And these counties and cities that don't have the resources, we're going to have to come alongside them with state resources to make sure they're fully funded with the full contingent of law enforcement officers. And then our schools, we need to make sure they're safe. Governor Kemp led on that $50,000 school safety grant. We need to increase that to $100,000, but we also now need to expand that to include our private schools, our Christian schools, charter school, public school, all schools, wherever the students. We need to make sure all students are safe. And we can do that by doubling the school safety grants.
Let me ask you about schools, because I've long had the theory, people for years would say failing communities create failing schools. I think it's complete opposite. You have good community, you have good schools, you'll have great communities. It's just how it goes. And we've now seen nationwide, the further that the left has pushed some of their programs, the worse the results have been, to the point where even a state like Mississippi that had problems for years, they now have a higher level of graduation rates and some of the scores they're putting up versus Western, Californias and such of the world. How much is the focus on not just what we're providing for the safety of schools, but what's being taught in our schools, to leave that to educators and parents and keep that out of the politicians' hands?
Well, Carlos, you were just teeing me up for my next point. Well, right now, this year, the General Assembly is talking about reading and writing at the fourth grade level. Mississippi's actually ranked number 9, and we're in the 20s. And so what happened in Georgia is we went through this whole language learning, and it doesn't work. It was just, came up, some college professor's grand idea, but it was never really tested. So we're going back to phonics. Our Christian schools, our private schools, they went back to phonics years ago, so they've not seen that dip. And some counties went back to phonics. But now we're going back and pushing phonics, and we can catch Mississippi in 5 years. That's really important. And the other key metric is 8th grade mathematics. If they don't catch mathematics by the 8th grade, they're not going to catch it ever through high school. And that's something that if we're going to have an advanced technology society, which is where we're going, we need to make sure some people have the math skills, and then also reading and writing. I'm an engineer, but you're going to have to read something. You have to read a set of blueprints. You're going to have to read documents, and you have to, it's important for everyone that's out there in the workforce. And so those are two areas that are really important because it's part of, the building blocks for what we want to do with advanced manufacturing and just really attracting more technology, more good paying jobs to Georgia.
Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State, running for governor. Do you have a few more minutes to hang out?
I do.
We got a few more questions I'd like to get to because I want to know what separates you policy-wise from the people that you're running against in the primary. What separates you? What's different about it? And what do y'all agree on? We'll ask those questions.
How are we going to get rid of that income tax?
And how? Because let me tell you, I hate taxes worse than anybody on planet Earth.
We've hit that month. That's all I can think about.
Well, yeah, because everybody's cutting checks. I just cut a check. Secretary of State Raffensperger, maybe you cut a check too. So we'll talk about that next on The Morning Extra on Extra 106.3. Tug and Listen until 10 on The Morning Extra on Extra 106.3. Make sure you download the app if you missed any of the conversation that we've had with Georgia gubernatorial candidate and Secretary of State here, Brad Raffensperger. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much for taking the time and not dodging questions because there were people that thought you might. When they called in, they're like, he's not going to answer these questions for you. So the fact that you did says a lot about you. I think that probably moves the needle with people.
Well, thank you.
Yes, sir. I want to talk about the differences in you and the other three candidates, at least on the Republican side. We're going into the primary. The things that you see that they're doing and that you agree with, and then the ones that probably more importantly that you would go the other way on.
Well, number one, I'm a Christian conservative businessman, and I had a 100% rating when I came out of the House of Representatives here in Georgia, 100% rating from Faith and Freedom Coalition. So that surprised folks. They thought it was this little darling that ran around as the party puppy. But I actually had the voting record. And so I've just always been very conservative. As a business owner, you're going to be, because it's tough out there, especially in the construction business, boom, bust. And then really, God got a hold of me. I guess I was raised in the church, but just my faith just deepened and deepened. It started with having our first child. And like a lot of folks, and just kept on, really deepening my faith, and then eventually ended up running the men's ministry at a pretty large church in Alpharetta, Johns Creek area, and then actually co-led a group of boys, middle school boys, for 3 years over at North Point. I've done some prison ministry with the folks at Perimeter Church. We used to go out to Gwinnett Youth Detention Center. That was, really rewarding to go out Saturday mornings just to trying to speak some, truth into people's lives, because you see the path they're on. And if they had, how do you help them, really grab a hold of their faith and realize there's a better path? And so faith's really important to me, and because I guess my faith's so strong, we lost our oldest son due to a fentanyl overdose in 2018. We don't talk about it much. Yeah. But I don't know how people get through some of the situations that you can have. Like, what happens when your child is hit with cancer? Will they survive? Will they get through it? What happens there? And that same son that died of fentanyl actually had stage 3B Hodgkin's lymphoma about 8 years earlier. So, we've been through an awful lot business-wise. But, Trish and I, we met in high school, got married when I was halfway through engineering school. And I tell that, and people just say, wow, no one does that anymore. But we've been blessed. We now have grandkids. But faith is really a big part of what I do. And really in public service, we're not in this for us. We're in it for people. And it's really, it's about giving back. How do you make people's lives better? And that's really about why jobs are so important. How do you reduce their tax burdens so that they can keep more of what they were? They're working hard. It's like I try and tell these legislators when we're in the Capitol, when you see the lights are on, you got AC or you got heat, that was paid for by a taxpayer. And so we need to always be mindful, stretch the dollar. How do we stretch that dollar and get them value? And you have to run that almost like a free market private enterprise organization, because we're always stretching the dollar, but also to keep our clients happy. So we have to give them great service, but we also have to be very efficient with what we have. And so when you're efficient with your resources and you come with that mindset, I think that's what really drives me, because I've been a business owner. Our first business was a child care center. And that's when you really see what families are struggling with, and you never lose sight of that. And then in the construction business, you can never get ahead of yourself, because you have these good times, and then all of a sudden you have these times where you're transitioning. So I think faith is a big part of what drives me, and then making sure that we have a great future for Georgia, and that gets back to just creating good paying jobs. And I have a plan for that. And everyone tells me it doesn't poll, but I do have a couple of distinctives that no one else does. And I'm the only one that's ever done some infrastructure projects. I did the 675 bridges, years ago, and I understand how roads work, because that's how I've been trained, and I've actually built them. Did a couple state cable bridges, done some big things, and we need to work on traffic improvements. So I salute Governor Kemp for the $1.7 billion for that Henry County, getting the toll lanes going both ways. Because I drive up and down that road an awful lot. But just imagine if you're a young couple and you got to drive that every morning coming to work.
Well, let's talk about, we're talking about making people whole, and you've been involved with making sure that some of these Ponzi schemes and some of these issues that have gone on in the past, that we're getting people back their money rather than it, as you were pointing out, going straight back to the state. Talk about that and how important that is, because that's also a differentiator when you can say, I have fought for people to make them whole again based off of how they were taken advantage of.
Well, absolutely. So we have a securities division, and we started investigating in conjunction with the federal SEC a Ponzi scheme that was described as a $140 million Ponzi scheme about First Liberty Building and Loan. I've already hit 3 people with a $500,000 maximum fine that we can hit them with. But we yesterday had a great announcement that one of the insurance companies came alongside and said, this person worked one of the members of the First Liberty brought these people, but they leveraged.
They led them in.
They were leveraging their position with our company, and so they came and they said, "We're going to make all of these 49 people whole," and that came out to a tune of $7 million. So these folks are going to get whole, and that's about 1/3 of the total folks. So we're continuing to just kind of peel back that onion. It's very complicated. There's money. It's almost as complicated as chasing, some guy that's trying to ping you, with cyber, so trying to get in. Well, that's what they did with banks and moving money around. But we're weaving that out and pulling it apart and finding out where the money went and, who, is really a part of this, who's a victim, and then also who was part of this whole fraud. And so we're going to fight hard. We actually announced a special investigator about 2 months ago, and his whole background is investigating financial fraud. And we're getting a lot of information. We're speeding up this thing. My term finishes up 1st of January, and with good Lord, help, we'll get an answer to all this, and we'll get as much money back. But the fellow we had yesterday with us at the Capitol when we announced this, he had been defrauded $1.3 million, and he'll be 93 years old this year. They were preying on people that are 60, 70, 80, and 90 years old. And you have to just understand that is reprehensible. To hold yourself out as a Christian, conservative, Republican, and then you bring people into a fraud, and you are defrauding them.
Very disappointing, without a doubt. Quickly, there's been a lot of discussion, as we talked to Brad Raffensperger, is the candidate for governor, Secretary of State. The elimination of the income tax in Georgia to match Florida and Tennessee. How do you see that? Can that happen? Is it a good thing if it happens? And how do you make it happen?
It would be a good thing. But the first thing we can do, because it's the fastest thing you can do, is start capping property taxes. Because if you ask them, okay, you're paying your federal taxes this month, go back and look, how much did you pay for property taxes, how much you pay for state income tax, how much you pay for federal. We know Fed's the big one. Can't do anything about that.
Right.
But they're going to probably say, my property taxes are actually the same as what I'm paying right now. We can actually reduce that right now. The Senate plan was actually taking that and reducing it over 7 years. That sounds good if they're young like you. You're 35 years old, something like that. But what about someone that is 75 years old? And you say it's going to take 7 years. They're looking at you saying, Brad, I'll be 82 years old. What am I supposed to do with that? I don't even know if I'll be alive. Could you get me property tax reductions now? That's job one. And then we'll start looking at reducing the income tax. That'll be stage 2.
That would be a huge help. I know that we're always concerned about our schools and our roads and all the social services, and so I am willing to make sure that is typically paid for through my property taxes. But yeah, when you've seen the jump that we have seen, I'm in far north Forsyth County, and yes, the property values have grown, but to see how much that has gone up, just as you alluded to before, versus what the take-home pay is, those two have been out of whack for a lot of Georgians.
Yeah, and the challenge we really have is sometimes when you give a politician or a bureaucrat money, they'll figure out how to spend it.
Boy,
and,
yes.
and that's the problem. Is they don't think about giving it back.
I got a 15-year-old and 11-year-old daughter in my home. They're the same thing there, too.
Are you concerned at all that if you're elected governor, that we're going to run across some sort of fraud that we don't know about like we've been seeing in other states around the country?
Well, I think that I always support doing audits to make sure that we're not being defrauded by people that want the easy life, and that what they're doing is living off the taxpayer. Because I believe that everyone should have work. My first job, I started, actually going out to a golf course. I wasn't supposed to be on there, but we'd walk through the creek, pick up golf balls, and then we'd try and resell them, make 25 cents, 50 cents a golf ball. Then I was picking up rocks one summer because they didn't have a driver's license from a sod farm before they, seeded it. So I always finding what jobs, and I became an iron worker from 16 all the way through college. Hard work, but that allowed me to have money for college and actually get married to Tricia when I was going halfway through engineering school.
There you go. How do people find out more about you, Brad?
It's Brad for Governor Incorporated at bradforgeorgia.com. Bradforgeorgia.com.
There you go. Easy to find them. Appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming and talking to our listeners on the Morning Extra. And we wish you nothing but success, man. Best of luck.
Have a great sunny day.
Yes, sir. Absolutely right. For Brad and for Los and Bryce, too, my name is Tug. Y'all come back now. You hear?